Welcome to Find Myself Free, the podcast. I'm Ellie Young, alcohol-free life coach, mom, and athlete. I'm dedicated to helping others change their relationship to alcohol by sharing my journey of transformation. Fascinated by my own capacity for change after decades of gray area drinking, I'm passionate about sharing what I've learned from neuroscience and positive psychology to help you break free from the drinking cycle and unlock your true potential. Hear my personal stories of triumph and struggle as I navigate raising two boys, finding myself after 40, building a business, and doing it all alcohol free. From women's health and cycle syncing to fasting and biohacking, this podcast is your roadmap to a healthier, purpose filled life that starts with changing your relationship to alcohol. It's time to embrace change, find balance, and create the life you were meant for. Welcome to Find Myself Free. I have a wonderful guest on the show today, everybody. This is Dr. Ami. She is the founder of the Self-Care Institute. She holds a PhD in mind-body medicine and is a board-certified music therapist. Ami provides therapeutic support for individuals and organizations worldwide with burnout prevention, burnout recovery, stress management, and sustainable self-care. Ami has presented on self-care and occupational burnout at international events and conferences. She has also developed and facilitated research-based educational courses and programs on burnout prevention and self-care. Ami received a PhD in mind-body medicine from Saybrook University, an MA in music therapy from St. Mary of the Woods College, and a BA in psychology from Loyola Marymount University. Ami was born and raised in Hawaii and splits her time between Southern California and the Big Island of Hawaii. I think you are going to really enjoy today's conversation. What Ami offers marries beautifully with the way I coach the release of alcohol for women. This is a huge part of self-care that is missing, and I love the way she explains it. So without further ado, on to the show. Welcome, welcome. This is Ellie Young, your host. Welcome back to Find Myself Free. Today, I am so excited to introduce you to a new friend and guest, Ami Kunimura. She is a PhD of mind-body medicine, has a PhD of mind-body medicine, and is the founder of the Self-Care Institute. We met at our local meditation studio, and I am so excited to pick her brain today and share with you what she has been working on. Hi, Ami. How are you?
Hi, Ellie. I'm great. I'm very grateful to be here on your podcast. And
Yeah.
really fun to met you through just our own similar interests and community.
Yeah, I jumped at the opportunity when I heard what you did because I'm so curious about mind-body medicine. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what you do?
Yeah, so like you just said, I'm the founder of the Self Care Institute, and most of my work focuses on providing professionals with support for burnout prevention, burnout recovery, stress management, and self care. So I work with individuals, but most of my work is with organizations or teams or companies. I provide trainings and workshops for teams to help people learn about what burnout is, what self care is, but mostly, how to prevent burnout or how to manage our own stress. And my PhD is in mind body medicine, and it's a pretty rare PhD. I don't know many people who have this degree, but mind body medicine, it's a science that looks at like the interconnected relationship between the mind and the body. So approaching the mind and the body as one unified whole, and looking at the healing practices and the other types of practices we can use to help our mind, body, and spirits. But looking at, mind body medicine, that word medicine can be a little confusing. Sometimes we think of medicine as like pharmaceuticals or taking Tylenol. That's maybe the average person's understanding of medicine. But mind body medicine looks at medicine as being something that is very wide range of practices. So medicine can be food, medicine can be music or meditation or hanging out with a friend or getting social support, but looking at, different practices that can support our overall health and well-being. And, not just to prevent illness or prevent burnout or stress, but really to what's going to help us thrive and live the life that that is optimal for each one of us. And for each one of us, that's going to be a little bit different. But again, that word medicine, it's again not just like a pill in a bottle, but it's these practices that are available to us almost all the time. A lot of these practices can be free, but again, can be things we're already doing, like breathing or, getting some sunshine on our skin when we need to. But
Yeah.
that's the general idea of what mind body medicine is.
I love this. I'm so curious about this. I'm an alcohol-free life coach
Mhm.
by training, and a lot of my audience will identify that with this part of ourselves where we've been using alcohol to self-medicate for a really long time, and we've really lost touch with that inner knowing that would even be able to say, "I'm burnt out, I'm stressed out, I'm tired." We've been denying ourselves these things for so long because we are just pushing, constantly trying to get the job done as mothers, as partners, in our jobs. And so I am so curious. And I'd really only started my kind of mind body journey in this past year. I've always been very curious about it. But to be honest, I was often just like checking a box. It was part of my, overachieving to-do list before. I was like, oh, I have to meditate, like I need to meditate. And I grasped the concepts of how good it could be for me. And I maybe even scratched the surface level of benefiting from it. But because I was still caught in the throes of like self-medicating with alcohol for most of my stress and anxiety, I don't think I ever really accessed my true kind of inner knowing. So tell us more about like what are some kind of daily practices that one can start to tap into who might be coming out of, an alcohol dependence situation?
hmm Yeah. So daily practices, we can look at a good place to start is looking at, morning, like within the first 30 minutes of waking up and at nighttime, about 30 minutes before going to sleep. And like bookending our days with self care, or we start with it right away and end with it at the end of the day. Now, as far as daily practices, especially mind body practices, I encourage people to keep this simple because we want to do what we're going to actually do. It can be easy to like start thinking about all these stuff we want to do and have high hopes like, okay, I'm going to wake up and like do an hour of yoga, then my meditation and my affirmations. And it can be this long list of things.
Mhm.
Where I recommend starting, though, with mind body practices is let's start in the morning practices, looking at, again, this first 30-minute window of waking up. First, we're looking at what we do and what we don't do. What we don't do matters just as much as what we don't do, because that also includes making some conscious choices. But as far as what we want to do, what I recommend first is hydrating yourself, like getting a nice big glass of water and drinking that right away. We often wake up dehydrated. And when you drink your water, first, I mean, it is very nourishing for your body. Our bodies need water, obviously, but this also serves as a symbol where you are hydrating and nourishing yourself first, before looking at your phone, before doing anything else. And this symbol of like water as self care can be so sacred. It can be a very easy practice to do, but it can be an easy practice to not do either. And when we choose that first, choose to nourish our bodies first with water, again, very simple practice that helps our brain, our body, but again, again, it's this feedback towards our body. Like, I'm going to give to myself in a very simple way at the beginning of the day. And so
I love
starting,
that. I
yeah.
love that. I actually, this is something I recommend to my clients as part of their daily morning ritual is if they're not in the habit of hydrating first thing, if they're
Mhm.
just like, give me my coffee and then they're
Mhm.
jumping into their phones, it's like
Yeah.
Pandora's box. They're just
Yes.
triggering that nervous system to start going into like stress mode of like, I got to reply to this. Um,
Exactly.
yeah. And so that those first couple minutes, I just say, keep the phone out.
Yeah.
And if you can't get in the habit of pouring a, lemon water or whatever it is for yourself, stack it onto the habit of making your cup of coffee because you already have the habit of getting the coffee. So to
Yeah.
say, every time I make my coffee, I'm actually going to pour myself some electrolytes, some lemon water. So you
Yeah.
stack it onto that habit. That's a James Clear atomic
Yes.
habits
Yeah.
habit
I've
that
read
I
that.
love.
Great book.
All right, carry on. What is your next one?
Yeah. So starting with the water and like just what you said, something that's nourishing and calming, so something like coffee or yeah, going on our phone, that is very stimulating to our body. And stimulation's okay. Like we can get there eventually. We just don't want to force ourselves into that right away. And then I recommend just taking a few deep breaths and whatever that might look like for someone. It could be while they're still laying in bed, it could be, just sitting up. But again, nourishing our body with oxygen. We all know, just like water, we also need oxygen. But when we consciously give that to ourselves, again, it's feedback to our own body and us, giving us ourselves a signal of, okay, I'm here with myself and I'm starting my day with some intention. And even those two practices just by themselves can be enough. Now, you can add other things to your morning routine, like a little bit of movement can be good, whether it's stretching or taking a very gentle walk, but just slowly moving your body. But it's this general theme of just not forcing yourself into this state of like productivity right away, but knowing that you're coming off of many hours, hopefully, of like being somewhat unconscious, in your warm bed and not forcing yourself to go from that right away to being awake and having to do all the things right away, but being gentle with yourself. And yeah, like you said, your nervous system, not just activating it right away because we don't want to go from being asleep to going straight into a stress response. And that can be easy to do if wake up and grab your phone and check your email. Like, it's not what we want to do at first. Again, even just like a 20 to 30-minute buffer can be really helpful for our mind and for our body. And then similarly at the end of the day, we want to again book in our days with self-care. All the stuff that happens in the middle is going to be a lot of us giving to others, listening to others, doing things for others. But we can find moments of self care for ourselves, and even really small moments matter. So, at the end of the day, now this is where there's a lot of flexibility, and the choices we make at the end of the day can depend on our own personality and what is actually relaxing for each one of us. And each one of us has, different neurochemistry and different nervous systems. And what we can do to prepare before bed. Again, same thing. It's what we don't do matters just as much as what we do. And something like putting our phones away, again, 20 to 30 minutes before going to sleep, if possible, or just minimizing, phone use. I understand if you need to send a text here or there, but maybe not scrolling social media. But putting the phone down and allowing yourself some darkness. That darkness is going to be a signal to the mind and the body. And, if you like to read, that's totally fine. But having somewhat of a dim light, but keeping your lighting down and then keeping that stimuli down, being careful of the types of conversations you have 30 minutes before bed. Maybe it's not the best time for serious conversations with other people, but also conversations with yourself. Maybe this is not the time to ask like the big life questions or think of like, okay, how am I going to problem solve this thing that's been really bothering me? But the funny thing is, that is often when those thoughts are going to come up, is when you start to slow down, when there is time for yourself. And it's often when we're lying in bed, like right before we're going to sleep, that like those thoughts start to pop up. But there is a way to deal with that. And you can, keep a pen and paper by your bedside and write down questions and say, okay, like I'll get this tomorrow. I don't have to answer this right now. But it is you setting boundaries with yourself toward the end of the day. And again, not forcing yourself to be productive or problem solving or like so active all the way to the point where, you're trying to fall asleep because that
Right.
might make it difficult for you. But again, what we don't do matters as much as the choices that we do make. And for each person, it's going to look a little bit different. When it comes to self care does need to be personalized to each individual. Like what self care might be for you might not be the same thing for me. And that's totally okay. We can acknowledge our differences, but honor that for ourselves. And, I like to look at self care as being really this lifelong experiment where, sometimes we'll try to practice self care and sometimes it might work and be rejuvenating. At other times, or it might be a little bit stressful. But as we change through life, as we go through life, especially as women, as we move through our different life stages, our self care will need to transition with that. And yeah, we need to just respect where we are in our lives and make choices around that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, how would you coach the woman who, has young children, and the reason she might be in this stressful place in the first place is because she's not prioritizing
Mhm.
self-care, let alone any sort of act for, herself. She's way low on her priority list, and so sometimes, they hear these things like, "Oh, yeah, I can't even get up before my family. My baby wakes up." I mean, when I was a young mother, my kids were roosters. They woke up at 5 a.m., and so carving out 5 minutes for yourself can be incredibly challenging. Your brain, it feels guilty, right, if you're not doing things for others constantly. I know I struggled with this a lot myself, that if I wasn't working or achieving or doing something for my family, that I somehow wasn't worthy. How do you coach someone who might be stuck in that struggle?
Yeah, that guilt is a very big piece here. Now, I do want to acknowledge though, there are going to be times in life where self-care is going to be more challenging. Like you just said, it will be hard to sometimes to find those 5 minutes.
Mhm.
And we do need to acknowledge that. And what I don't want to do is like turn this guilt around where, yeah, we can sometimes feel guilty when we're not giving to people or guilty when we're giving to ourselves. But I also don't want people to feel guilty like, oh, also not taking enough care of myself and I'm now feeling guilty about that. So it's like a no-win situation. So we need to be careful about guilt here, but guilt is something to work with here. Guilt isn't necessarily something bad when it comes to self care because it can actually point us to what we need to work on. And so when I'm coaching people, especially when it comes to self care, I work with a lot of mothers. We do need to keep this bigger picture in mind. And first, I like to zoom out and take a look at what did we learn about self-care when we ourselves were young children? How was that modeled for us? How was self-care talked about, if at all? And what did we see from our own caretakers? Sometimes it's our own mothers or whoever, was our primary caregivers, but seeing how are we carrying on some of these values or these social norms that might not be very good for us.
Mhm.
And so when we can first take a look at what are our own values around what it means to be a mother or caretaker or to take care of other people or even to be a working professional or a helping professional, what are our values around that? Because that can often point to that guilt piece. Sometimes we've learned that we need to give to everybody else first before we give to ourselves. That is a very common social norm, especially that women carry because we've seen it. We've seen it in other women who came before us, and that's been passed on through generations.
Mhm.
And so first we need to just make sense of it, but also find compassion for it too. I don't want to also like, I'm not going to into like, let's just blame our parents for everything, but because they were doing the best they could and they learned from the previous generation and certain things were passed down for a reason. Different people have come up in different times, different generations have had different challenges. But right now, what we can do is take a look at, okay, what do I believe about self care? And are these things really true still?
Right.
And when we take a look at, okay, what was modeled for me and how did I take that modeling and then apply it to my own life? We can then realize we are in the position of being models ourselves for this upcoming generation. Think of your child or whoever it is in your life. I work with also a lot of teachers who are, have their own students, but what are we modeling for them as far as the messaging around self-care? And when we look at not giving to ourselves and not allowing them to see us giving to ourselves, that's sending a certain message. And so, in times, especially when it is hard to find those moments of self care, or like, that maybe the 30 minutes in the morning just isn't possible because, yeah, you're waking up to like a crying baby or people need you.
Mhm.
That's going to be a reality sometimes, and that can be okay. Usually it's temporary. But what we can do then is what I recommend is combining your caregiving or your parenting responsibilities with your own self care responsibilities.
Right.
So, for example, you can still try and go drink your glass of water, even if you're doing it while you're caring for someone else, but they're seeing you giving to yourself at the same time.
Yeah.
And we're modeling. I think one of my favorite authors is Glennon Doyle. And
Oh, yeah.
she says, she talks about, women having to be martyrs
Yeah.
and that being this social norm that's just been so prevalent for decades. But she said, well, instead of a martyr, what if we're models for the next generation? What if, our own daughters saw us taking care of ourselves?
Yeah.
How that change how then women in general approach self care? And, a lot of when it comes to burnout or stress or challenges with self care, there are so many systemic issues there that are very prevalent right now. But this is how we start to change some of these systemic
Yeah.
issues is, yeah, what are the choices we're making to change things for the next generation? But
Yeah.
sometimes we're going to have to combine our own self care while we're taking care of others, but allowing them to see this is
Yeah.
going to be really important.
That's really interesting. You have me thinking so much. I mean, I think I keep thinking of that book, the Shel Silverstein book, The Giving Tree,
Yeah.
where the tree gives everything
Uh-huh.
and is like nothing left but a stump by the end.
Mhm.
And the child is still like, what? Do you have nothing left for me? Like, I still need to take and take. And I, like you said, like that idea has been idolized for women. Like this is what if you are going to be a Mother Teresa, you need to give of yourself until you have nothing left. And that's your only worth in life is sacrifice. And I've struggled with this myself because even though I'm aware of it now and I'm aware that I can model it better for my children, I still feel guilt and I still feel that I almost have to be given permission by somebody else. Part of the dynamic with me and my husband when I did stop drinking was that I used alcohol to cope with the level of sacrifice that I was doing. And I never asked for help. I just kept doing more and more and more and thought I had to, but I also resented him through it. And it was almost like I was waiting for him to give me permission to do something else, to be like, to step up. And instead of me asking for it or even just taking it. And I think there is also this fine line between women getting really righteous and pissed off about it and being like demanding it and
Mhm.
being kind of like mean about it. Like, I need this, mom needs this. And I hear myself saying that kind of stuff. Like when I get frustrated that no one's helping me clean the kitchen and I'm like, mom needs to take a break. And I get mean about it instead of coming from this place of like, mom's got to take care of herself right now. And I'm going to step away. And it would be awesome if you guys could help clean the kitchen or whatever it is, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, and I see that a lot. And that, yeah, that sort of mean voice that starts to come out, that is real, but oftentimes that is our inner child reaching out of what we either didn't get as children, or, that this voice comes out that's saying, like, it's almost like a desperate call for
Yeah, it's like, "It's not
self-care.
fair, it's not
Yeah,
fair." Yeah,
it's not fair. And, really part of that voice is right, is that some things aren't fair, but it's sometimes that voice is just talking to the collective in
right.
general. And yeah, and finding sometimes more compassionate ways to express that can help us actually get our needs met a little more. But what I also find too is that mean voice can sometimes be turned inward, and we start to talk to ourselves that way too. And that's what we really need to be careful of, is when we start to like yell at ourselves inside of like, no, of like, I need this, and being very demanding of ourselves. That's where it can help to catch ourselves, to take a breath, to like slow down our voice, lower the volume. And that's to me the signal of we need to ask a question of ourselves rather than making a demand. And that question is, what do I need right now? And a lot of times, yeah, when we're feeling resentful of our partners, or even like, oh, all these people pulling at us, it's like what we actually want sometimes is just someone to stop and look at us and say, like, hey, what do you need right now?
Right.
Wouldn't that be so nice? But we can do that for ourselves too. And sort of that, that mean, angry voice, and that anger can be a sign that our boundaries have been crossed. And that's again, we can pause, ask ourselves, what do I need right now? And going from there rather than yelling at ourselves or at other people, because that might not be that productive.
Yeah.
But that anger can be a signal.
This is so relevant to my audience because so much of what we have denied is that checking in
Hmm.
of ourselves. We
Hmm.
just want to power through and push through things, and alcohol or whatever we've been using to numb that dissatisfaction. And it can be busyness. It can be achieving as a mother. It
Yes.
can be just like, I'm volunteering at school and I'm getting up early and I'm still working out. I'm doing, check, 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 check. And then, but checking in with ourselves, it's almost like it's too little, too late,
Yeah.
where that anger and that resentment builds.
Hmm.
Talk to us about, I was on your Instagram page. You guys check Ami out. What is your Instagram handle for everybody?
At Ami Kunimura. So yeah, at AMIKUNIMURA. That's my
Yeah,
home.
I'll put it in the show notes, but she has a really beautiful Instagram with lots of resources to check out. But one of the ones that caught my eye was this pushing versus resting. And this kind of is a nice segue from what we're talking about, where women are just, we're all trying to do it all now. And we do get caught in this like, rest feels indulgent, rest
Mhm.
feels like we're not worthy, and that this hustle culture where like I have to keep going, I have to do more all the time. Talk about that.
Yeah, so pushing versus resting. I know this might seem really weird, but sometimes it's hard to know what to do. Like, do I push through and like get things done so like I can rest later, or do I give myself a chance to rest now because I'm so exhausted, but then I have all these things on my mind? But one of the main behavioral patterns that can lead to burnout or to exhaustion or to overwhelm is what I call pushing through. So we're pushing through our like energy deficits. So, like, pushing through being exhausted, like, okay, I'm so tired, but I got to get all this stuff done anyway. Or we push through emotional states, like, okay, I'm feeling all this stuff, but I got to push all my feelings aside, get things done, focus on other people. Or, pushing through our own limitations or boundaries. And when we do that too much, first of all, it is exhausting. We are like running on empty and, using energy we don't even have. It's like withdrawing from already an empty bank account and going to an energetic deficit.
Mhm.
Also, when we're pushing through, we are also compromising the trust we have in ourselves. We're compromising our own self respect because we are not respecting our own boundaries and limits. And that's a very dangerous thing for us to do with ourselves. But At the same time, there are going to be times where we do need to push through, where, okay, I'm tired, but I'm going to need to get this thing done. And then after I can rest. We will have busy periods in life, and that's okay. Like some of those busy periods can be a rush or can be really fun. Or if you're trying to meet a goal that does like fulfill a certain purpose in your life, that can be okay. We just don't want to be pushing through for a very long period of time and not knowing when it's going to end. So what we want to do is combine rest with pushing through. And also, I don't want to take away the drive from like very motivated people, especially motivated women who are going after things. And, that's me. I have like this very strong drive within myself. And it's sometimes hard to turn that down when I need to. But we need to remember resting matters too. And resting is actually part of the work. It's not separate. It's not taking us out of the work. It's not us being lazy, but that's us refueling so that we can push through in healthier ways where we're not disrespecting our limits, where we are honoring our own boundaries. And, that's going to look a little different for each one of us. But I really like how you do promote this alcohol-free lifestyle. And, what can help us here are having like real coping skills that are healthy rather than using coping strategies that are unhealthy. And, what I've seen as far as pushing through and resting of, what of some very like or some literature that was out there like years ago was like, do you remember doctors used to say that like, no, it's okay, it's healthy for your heart to like have one glass of red wine every night.
Right,
The research says, okay, doctors were telling their patients this. And,
right.
it's like then a lot of people started using that as a daily coping skill to unwind, to try to rest. But that alcohol also helps people push through and get through stuff.
Yes.
It's a way of numbing out and, again, trying to push through whatever's there. However, recent research shows that that is very wrong. This one glass of wine a day thing, that is way too much.
Mhm.
And alcohol should not be used at the end of the day as a coping skill in this way, where it actually, it disrupts your sleep. It keeps you from getting actual rest. So when we're looking at how do we rejuvenate ourselves and what does real rest look like, there are different types of rest here. There's physical rest of resting our bodies, but giving ourselves a mental break too, or emotional rest or spiritual rest. There's lots of different types of rest to have here.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. You just touched on so much there. And you really hit the nail on the head when you said alcohol is really used for both to
Mhm.
push through things. And it's also like the mommy wine culture's permission to rest. It's
Yeah.
like, you can't
Mhm.
get away from your kids in the evening, but you can have this wine that will help you check out.
Mhm.
And yeah, you're right. It was doing us such a disservice. It was raising our adrenaline and cortisol. So, we're waking up with anxiety in the middle of the night,
Mhm.
anxiety, chronic anxiety over time, and it's depriving us of quality sleep. So, a lot of times I talk to my clients about it feels like it's the reward and we're trying to take your one reward away from you. But
Mhm.
ultimately, when you break it down, like, is it a reward to raise your stress levels? Is it a reward to deprive you of good sleep? And it's like, no. And then it's going back to that. What do I really need? What
Yes.
I need real rest. And what does that even look like? Because for so many of us, we haven't had real rest in so long. And that's why I love this mind body exploration
Mhm.
journey that I'm on right now. And the studio like Wellspring is where you can go and tap into these different practices and explore this side of yourself that almost it feels like a kid again because you're just like, who am I? I haven't touched base with that person in such a long time.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, getting into the true self care. I have this term I made up. It's called pseudo self care. So, this is a term I coined because it's a behavior pattern I've seen in every single person I work with, every person I know. I see this in myself too. But really, what pseudo self care is, these are behavior patterns that we think our self care, but it's really behavior that's manifesting from avoidance, perfectionism, numbing, addiction, self sabotage, or something else. That's not real self care. Now, there can be a very fine line between what true self care is and what pseudo self care is. For example, after a long day at work or just a tiring day, maybe you just can't wait to get to your couch and watch an episode on Netflix of your favorite show, like whatever it might be. And that can be great self-care. I'm not against watching TV or shows or anything. It can be nice to just, be entertained by something. And that could be real self-care if you get yourself comfortable, make a nice cup of tea or something and relax and watch something. But if one episode turns into two to three and you end up binge watching, late at night, that's when it becomes pseudo self care. The true self care would have been, yeah, one or two episodes and you get yourself to sleep, which is what you really need. But the pseudo self care happens when that line is crossed somehow.
Right.
And we can do this with social media, with food, with exercise. And so, what true self care is that line, it's going to be different for all of us.
Mhm.
But pseudo self care, though, again, it's the behavior pattern that's very human, but it can teach us what real self care actually is.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the problem with our worlds today is that everything is so just like push a button and you get this like instant gratification, this instant relief. You
Yeah.
know, it's a lot easier to drink a bottle of wine than it is to be like, hey, I'm going to take a walk around the block with my dog and at sunset to try
Mhm.
and decompress.
Yeah.
And so that is the biggest friction we face right now is just everything is so easy. There's just abundance of like dopamine hits and
Mhm.
we're just blowing our dopamine circuits out. And that real self-care is much more kind of these smaller incremental stacking of healing behaviors
Yeah.
and training your brain to crave those instead of this like quick hit little work involved type of behaviors.
Yeah. Yeah. And, it's true self care. Yeah. It's not always easy. And, self care too, it can mean doing the hard stuff, like saying no, even when it's uncomfortable to, or setting a boundary, or having a hard conversation, or, being able to set a limit with yourself. The true self care, it's not always the easiest thing to do. And sometimes it's not always enjoyable. Sometimes it means sitting with feelings that are very uncomfortable. Like, yeah, even going to a meditation class at Wellspring, sometimes it can start out nice, but then some feelings start bubbling up. And having to sit with that is not always easy. It's not always comfortable, but sometimes the true self care is giving your feelings some space to be heard and experienced and treating yourself as an emotional human being that is multidimensional. And then doing the work to work through those feelings and seeing they're there.
Yeah, I love that. One area I do work with my clients around that I think you're going to have a lot to add to this is the beliefs about the substance, about alcohol. Oftentimes, when we're uncovering the attachments, these subconscious attachments that people have to drinking, they can happen on three different levels. And the first one is the belief about the substance. Like I really need alcohol to change my state of being. I need it to relax. I need it to enjoy myself, whatever that is. Then there's beliefs at the level of society. Like I need it to fit in. I need it to be a part of this group, right? And
Yeah.
then the third one is beliefs about self, that I am not enough without this substance. Like I can't get through this hour of parenting without my wine. I can't be smart or funny or witty, without this drink.
Mhm.
And that stems from a belief that I am not enough. So talk to us a little bit about that enoughness.
Yeah, that enoughness, one of the biggest obstacles to self care is a lack of self worth when it makes it hard for us to choose self-care. So for example, if like we don't think we're worthy of love and care and compassion, even at an unconscious level, sometimes we're not even aware of this, then we're unlikely to choose those behaviors for ourselves. And that feeling of enoughness, it can be sort of this almost illusion that we're chasing sometimes, or we're going after these norms of, okay, I'm going to feel enough when, or I'm going to be happy when, and fill in the blank with any number of things. But this enoughness can sit differently with different people. But what I see, especially when it comes to burnout and stress and work and just managing like our work and our life, professional life or personal life, is this sense of enoughness is this unattainable goal that we are trying to reach with practices usually that aren't good for us. But what can often help is to take a step back and take a look at this internal dialogue, like you just said, like, yeah, like I can't do this, I can't do that, or like I'm not worthy of this. So take a look at this internal dialogue and see how connected it is to so many social norms that are out there right now. And, alcohol is a really good example here of a social norm. Like, look at how it's portrayed in the media of, just people pouring a drink to deal with something or at the end of the day, or,
Right.
or these rules that we've sort of abided by without really maybe thinking about it, like, okay, when I get together with my friends, a bunch of us get together, this is what we do. And
Mhm.
it just happens. But
Mhm.
know that we can question some of these norms, some of these behaviors, see if it's good for us. But what we also want to question is, what is enough? What am I actually chasing here? Because sometimes people will burn out because they are chasing someone else's version of success or of what enough is.
Mhm.
And oftentimes, maybe the goal isn't to get to a state of feeling like enough, because maybe there's always going to be something else we could do, or there's going to be, another goal. And especially with self-care, I like to say we're not trying to get to this landing place where it's like, okay, I got my self-care down now. It's perfect. And it's just going to be like that forever. Like, no, things are going to keep changing. But
Right.
when we question, what is enough?
Right.
What does that actually mean right
Yeah.
now? And how can I be enough
Yeah.
with just who I am, aside from what I do? And this being and doing is one thing we can try to separate. Because I know a lot of us are thinking we're not doing enough. Either our to-do list is just constantly growing and we can't check everything off, or we feel this pull or compulsion to constantly be doing things for others.
Mm.
What about our being?
Mm.
Are we being enough and just who we are?
Yeah.
Sometimes that is the enoughness
Yeah.
toward.
That's so beautiful. Yeah, I definitely think creating that space, like you said, to question it, to
Mhm.
question the subconscious impulse to
Yeah.
wanna, like, say, "I need to do this. I need to do this because I'm not enough right now. Like, I have to cope in this way."
Mhm.
So I
Mhm.
definitely identify with that, and I think, my audience is gonna get a lot from this conversation. This has just been giving me so many new ways of understanding the self
Mhm.
and to learn to be just constantly checking in and asking what we need. Um, Tell my listeners where we can find you and if you have any kind of programs going on right now that they can check out.
Yeah, so you can find me at selfcareinstitute.com. That's my website. I have my online courses there right now. I have a few opening up in the next few months. We can find all the information there. Again, selfcareinstitute.com. But I have a lot of free resources there too. I have free guided meditations, articles on self care. But my most popular resource, it's called Take a Moment. And it's an email that I send out every Wednesday that provides information information and practices on self care. So every week's a little different. Sometimes it's a self care practice. Sometimes it's just information on self care. I keep up to date with the latest research on burnout and stress, and I try to share that. But that's my most popular resource. Again, it's email that goes out every Wednesday. But when it comes to self care, the funny thing about it is that even though our self care, obviously, it is so important for us to take care of ourselves, but yet it can be really easy to forget with everything else going on. I mean, time goes by so fast, but sometimes at the end of the day, it's like the whole day has gone by and I haven't done much. But what we need with self care is just consistent reminders and compassionate reminders. And this email is meant to do that, to come into your inbox in the middle of the week. And so that we can all just be consistently learning about self care together as a collective.
That is great. I signed up and
Oh,
I
nice.
totally agree with you. Keeping things like this top of mind
Mhm.
and not allowing it to feel like a to-do list or some sort of
Yeah.
pressure, but to just inspire you. It's really a form of inspiration. And the more you are tapping into yourself, the more you're going to learn and the more you're going to be just more compassionate with your own self. And these practices become like second nature because you start to seek them. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you, Ami. This has been such a beautiful conversation. I'm so grateful to have met you and have you on. Let's do this again in the future.
Yes, that sounds great. Thank you so much, Ellie, for having me here.
All right. Thank you. And as always, everybody, I'm with you. You got this. Hey, you've just listened to an episode of Find Myself Free. And if some part of this left you wanting more, if your curiosity has been piqued and your intuition is telling you, I'm ready for more, then check out my coaching offers at findmyselffree.com. I have the Brave course to help you break free from booze. And I designed this course with the exact lessons that led to my transformation. I also have the balance challenge for those ready to learn the art of cycle syncing to balance their hormones. If you're looking for additional support and to take either of these programs to the next level, I also offer one on one coaching. Now, I worked with a coach for 4 months at the start of my alcohol free journey, and it made all the difference. Being able to talk to someone who knew what I was going through and could help me navigate my new world gave me a foundation of support I could build on. And it's a big reason why I'm a coach today. I want to help others find their freedom and level up their health. If this sounds good to you, connect with me at findmyselffree.com and set up a call. Listen to your intuition that is telling you you were meant for more. I am with you. You got this.